Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Lee, a program manager in Google Play and a volunteer mentor with Google for Startups. I'm excited to be joined today by Guy Assad, CEO of Clerky, which is a dedicated financial assistance app that helps everyday families automate and manage all aspects of their finances using modern-day AI algorithms. He is a recent alumnus of the first Google for Startups Accelerator Black Founders cohort. And today we're going to talk a bit about his founder journey and what his company Clerky does to help users manage their finances and how he's worked with Google in the process on his Android app. So without further delay, let's get started.
For me, growing in the circumstances that I grew up in, it's kind of hard to see all the financial hardships or the financial struggles that occurs in your community all the time without wanting to, do something to try to either level the playing field or give struggling families kind of like a fighting chance. That as a whole is not just a big problem for consumers, but it's also a big problem for the banks. To put that in perspective for you, so every year, right, the big banks are going to originate somewhere around 1 trillion in terms of new debt. But also every year, tens of millions of families are going to struggle to repay back that debt. And again, that's something that always felt really, really close to home. And that's something that, I've always wanted to kind of sink my teeth in. And having worked with some of these banks, one of the things that we quickly realize is it's not something that they can solve themselves internally for a variety of reasons, frankly, not all because they don't want to solve it, but there's a lot of regulatory hurdles that kind of precludes them from doing that. There's also a lot of legacy systems that just makes it very difficult for them to implement some of the digital solutions that consumers would want to see. And so, it's a pretty challenging problem. It's one that we think that we can actually solve. And so we decided to quit our job and start Clerky.
That's amazing. It's a bold and interesting way to go about solving some critical problems that are out there and seeing that space to do it, and also to have the aim at trying to help broader communities that maybe are being impacted by debt greater is, I think, really a wonderful thing. So can you tell me a bit more about what is unique about Clerky and how does it help users? FinTech right now is a pretty hot space across the board for startups. So would love to hear a bit more about the app and the company.
I think for us, we try to solve a real problem for real struggling families. And again, that's, always the focus and the core of what we do. And so for, folks that might not be familiar with what we do, we're an AI-driven company, and our financial automation platform is purely purpose built to kind of help struggling families get out of that debt cycle that we're talking about. And so, we one of the things that we really pride ourselves in doing is just the ability to have anyone join the app and basically get rid of 70% or more, in some cases 40%, but in some cases as much as 80% we've seen through one click. And again, that's an incredibly hard problem to solve because you have to sort of determine what exactly is affordable for the user, right? What can they realistically pay after they've written down that debt in a sustainable fashion, and how do we also minimize the loan losses on the banking side as well. And so that's kind of what we do. That's our special sauce, so to say, and that's kind of what's really hard to replicate.
I think what you're building is wonderful and unique, especially with the AI aspects of how to best serve your customers. But were there any general driving decisions in terms of you building for Android?
I mean, to put it simply, I think we quickly came to the realization that you can't really fulfill that mission that we're talking about without having an Android app. It's as simple as this. As you know, we pretty much started on iOS, and very quickly we grew to a pretty massive base through word of mouth. And one of the things that we started realizing is that a large part of the invited users that were coming in actually had to use the web app, which we had not prioritized at the time because they had Android devices. And so, we started thinking about that and started realizing that, again, to be successful at that, broad mission, we had to basically meet customers where they are and, not really increase the hurdle because we think they're struggling enough with, some of these financial woes. And so we started, experimenting with the Android ecosystem ecosystem and have gotten some pretty great results. We've been doing it on open testing, and now we're getting ready to kind of like, launch the official app basically this quarter.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about, how that journey has gone for you in the experimental portions of, the open testing aspects. And what in general do you think has been like the most positive part of that experience so far?
For me, it's just, this feeling, or at least notion that like, the Google Play ecosystem, it feels like it's built by builders for builders. There's just an incredible, focus on, flexible deployments from a development perspective. Just like, the vitals, being able to have access to all of these vitals at your fingertips. It's very data centric. And that's really helped us, frankly, in terms of a development, just understanding where do we go from there, how are people using the app, what's the retention look like, and so forth. And the beauty of it is just being able to do this without having to do any additional tooling right off the bat, but also giving the engineers access to that data is really imperative. And that's really allowed us to move fast and be on the same page.
I guess the flip side to that question is what are some unique challenges that you faced, and how's your team kind of navigated through those?
I mean, if I had to really think, it goes back to, the same engineering and builders concept, right? I think on one end, you have a very strong engineering product, but I think on the other end, I think there's clearly some stuff that is probably still not there in terms of transitions and design and so forth. But I'm really excited about some of the announcement that you guys had at I/O, and it seems like a lot of this is going to be resolved. It's nice to kind of have some of the material design, stuff off the shelf that you guys have put forward, and I think that's really helpful. But I think there's probably a little bit of way to go on that side as well. Primarily on the transition side, I would have to say.
Well, we're excited to keep working with you as you're going through your open testing into launch. And I do want to ask you maybe one final question as an entrepreneur who's kind of struck out on their own and seen an opportunity, to really kind of help others and build something unique. Do you have any just general advice for a startup as they get going, as they create a new idea for the market?
Just be very data driven and just jump right into it. There's never going to be a right time. There's never going to be a right answer. All you can really do is just, start experimenting, get in front of users, and, look at the data and figure out, where to go from there.
Well, Guy, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. It's been really great to hear a bit more about your founder journey, to hear also a bit more about Clerky and then your experience so far building on Android. So, thank you again. And we're excited for what's to come with Clerky's launch.
Awesome. And thank you guys. You've been really, really good to us. Especially the shout out to Start an Android team. They've been really phenomenal. So thanks.
Thank you, Guy.